am Renika Green, and I'm starting a new YouTube channel and podcast to really talk about myself and what I feel I can offer to this world, to specifically people who are dealing with real challenging issues and really need some encouragement and just wants to work on themselves to improve themselves overall. If that's not you, then you can move on from this page. But for anybody else who really wants some encouragement and could use just some different ideas on how to improve yourself and to see yourself better, then I encourage you to stay tuned to my future releases of videos and podcasts. I believe that I have a really good, strong message to give to the world. And one of the things that is really important for anybody starting off to do a video or a channel or a podcast is for the subscribers or people who are looking at the videos to really understand who that person is. And so today's video and podcast, I don't know how I'm going to do this yet, but it's really all about who I am and why what I have to say matters to you. Why you should pay any attention to me, what my story is, and all that good stuff. So I'm going to try to do this as quickly as possible because I hate being too long on emails and videos, not emails, but podcasts and videos. So let's get straight to the point. So who am I? So my username and my podcast and creative name for all of this stuff is going to be SeeChel. And I want to explain why I went from Seashell, what I chose Seashell, what that's all about. So I was thinking about like on a beach. So, you see all these seashells, like when you're walking on the beach, they're beautiful seashells at the edge of the sand. And it's like when you're trying to run away from the water a little bit, you come across all these beautiful seashells, and you have to be careful because they have jagged edges. If you step on them, you can hurt yourself. You can hurt your feet. And so, like when I go to the beach with my family, my mom in particular, we love reaching down and just like picking up the most beautiful pieces of seashells. And then I noticed that sometimes when I collect the seashells, it's not always the best seashells in the sand, but like the pieces that work together that you can like use as decorative pieces in your home, like they just fit, they work, even though they might be chipped, they might be something like imperfect with all of them. They kind of work together and they're beautiful just the way they are. And so that's why I tied into like the term seashell, but it's also a play off of words. So the way that I spell seashell is like C-S-E-E, and then shell, which is the spelling of my middle name, is part of my middle name. And so the play is, it's these beautiful pieces of myself all sprinkled all around it. And then when people kind of pick them all up and put them together, it kind of makes sense and it works. And it actually looks good sometimes. Sometimes it might not look so good, but it's unique in its own way. And that's why I chose that name. And so when you think about seeing shell, like you're actually seeing shell, who I am, and it's like the seashells on the beach. So I'm going to stop explaining that because I've done too much explaining. Anyway, I'm very detailed, as you're going to find out really soon. But one other thing that I wanted to share about myself and my life story is my life story. Like how I got to where I am right now, what's inspired me to do these inspirational, motivational, self-lifting, uplifting podcasts and videos. And I'll start off by saying that when people first meet me, their first impression of me is that I am privileged, that I'm a child that probably grew up with a silver spoon in my mouth. If not the silver spoon, that I grew up in some fancy, above average or upper middle class family with 2 parents in the home and lots of love, and probably the only child, or maybe a limited amount of siblings. They also believe that I care a lot about the way that I look. I care about the way that I present myself, that I might come across as like a spoiled brat, and that I'm a know-it-all. I've gotten that actual feedback before. And that really surprises me, because I don't intend to carry myself around like that. It's just how people see me when they first see me. And then when they see how nice I am, sometimes they get the misconception that, oh, she's just being nice for a reason, to gain something, or she's not really that nice. When in true actuality, I am simply this really nice individual who has been through so much and still actually smiles, even though I've been through crap. And no, I did not grow up with a silver spoon in my mouth. No, I did not grow up middle class. Actually, I grew up in what they call the bottom, from the area that I'm from Concord, North Carolina. And I grew up in the bottom. The bottom is the projects, and it's like these mini apartments. And it's not like a typical project that you would see in like some of these bigger cities, but it was a project. It was kind of a lot of interesting things happened when I grew up, things that I got to see that children probably shouldn't have to see. That type of projects is where I'm from. Grew up in a time where there was just a lot of racism and things happening in my community that a person my age normally doesn't come across. Like when I went to college and met all these other people and where they're from, I was like, oh, you didn't have to deal with all those things. It's kind of like we were just in a different world than the rest of the regular world, you know. So a lot of things, I've gone through a lot of things that a lot of my friends have no idea, like what it is like to be from an era like that, like an area like that. And then I had some abuse going on as well. So let me just break down a couple of these things for you to kind of paint the picture of what I've overcome and where I am, and why I feel like it's important for me to share my story and how I want to encourage people. So let's start off with the racism and things that we dealt with in the projects. So in the area that I grew up in, we were extremely heavily populated with a lot of Black families. I don't know any white people or any other mixed colors, Hispanics. I don't know anybody else who lived in our area outside of Black people. So there were a lot of families there that depended on government assistance. So my family was one of the families. We depended on government assistance. We used to get free food, food stamps, and my mom, you know, got the welfare checks and the child support checks and stuff like that. But it wasn't enough to like take care of us for Christmas or like buy clothes and shoes. So my mom used to actually buy like materials and make clothes for us. And so I never like actually got to go to school wearing popular shoes and clothes. I remember actually when Timberlands came out when I was in elementary school, and at SeeChel they had a version called Tim's. So actually we wore Tim's. We kind of got laughed at for that. But I mean, hey, you know, we just couldn't afford to get those name brand items and things like that. So very grateful. I had a great childhood, very grateful for my mom being able to provide like the food and stuff that we needed to eat. And then, you know, our shelter wasn't the best of everything. You know, it was my mom and 4 kids, and she was a single mom. My parents did get divorced when I was about 9 years old, 8 or 9 years old. And you know, living in the tiny little space with not a lot of room for a growing teenager and child developing to teenage years. It was tough, but you know, we made it. I was the oldest of my mom's kids, and but yeah, growing up in that town with not a lot of other diversity in our neighborhood, there was some effort going on. I can't remember, you know, specifically what it was, but there was some effort with the community and the city trying to diversify other schools that were in the area that we were in. So they took our location, even though we were in this one school district where we should have gone. It was like too many black kids, and all the elementary schools, all of the middle schools and all the high schools. It was like, because of all the black people in the bottom where we lived, like we had way more kids than the average Concord resident. You know, every Concord resident had like 2 kids, and on average in the bottom there was like 5 kids. You know, it was that serious. And so we were overpopulating the schools, and it was too many blacks like in one school in the area that we were closest to. So when I was in school, they started doing this process where they would come to the bottom and like segregate us, or like segment us based on, I guess, just the different streets that we lived in, and just like bus us to different schools to help diversify the other schools and relieve the schools that we were actually living, the district that we were living in. And so that resulted in a lot of change for me as a child, and a lot of my brothers and sisters and the community that I lived in. We changed schools very frequently, like somebody who's in the army or in the military, like military families, they move around. We were moving like every 2 or 3 years. We were changing schools. So like my elementary school, I changed 3 schools. Middle school, I was fortunate, but you know, middle school is only like the 6th grade to 8th grade. So really, like, it would have made no sense to kind of move us several times through middle school. But in high school, I did end up going to 2 high schools. And so for me, going through that change and having to kind of start over every time, like all these different schools, it was an interesting adjustment. And I think about today, I have a child, and like, she didn't have to go through those transitions. Like, our biggest fear was like 5th grade. Oh my gosh, she's in the 5th grade and she's got to go to 6th grade. She's going to go to middle school. Like, just imagine having to change that multiple times before you even get to middle school. It was kind of an interesting adjustment, but I think it was a nice adjustment because I was able to kind of help understand it and relate to change a little bit better than most people. The other thing, though, about the experience was in some of the school districts where it was predominantly a Caucasian school, there were some issues with adding us to the district to go to school there. First of all, we didn't live in their district, and the parents and the community, they just didn't want us going to that school in that area. And it was actually out of town for us. So it was a little bit of a drive to get there. And it was quite interesting. So when we would go to school, there were just some issues we would encounter. I remember there was a story a few years ago about the Confederate flag, and like this was something that was waved to us as we were going to on our way to school in this area. They were actually, people living in the community would wave their Confederate flags as we're on the bus and shout out really mean and nasty things to us as kids, and because they didn't want us there, but it wasn't really our fault. Like, we didn't have control over that situation. If we had the choice, we would have chosen to go to school with all of our friends and family that were in the area where we were from. That's the schools where we wanted to go to. So I think it was kind of unfair for people to take it out on the kids, as we didn't have anything to do with it, but they were not very nice to us as kids, being put into a situation that we don't really have any control over. It did warrant into some really scary times for us. Like, one time, I could just share a quick story about one of the people that was on the bus with me at the time that day. For whatever reason, I didn't ride the bus, but my brothers were there, and I don't think I went to school that day. But one of the boys, he got into a fight with two of his classmates after school, and so we had to catch the bus. If you missed the bus, it was going to be like trouble getting you home, because it was like out of town, and a lot of our family members didn't have cars and couldn't really come and have the transportation to pick us up and stuff. So you really had to be on the bus on time. So in the middle of his fighting, he's like trying to catch the bus, so he gets on the bus, and of course, like kids, you're fighting out the window, and he rolls down the window, and he's like still having words with the guys. And one of the little boys has mace. I don't even know why, but he has mace at school, and he sprays the guy in the face. And the school bus driver saw it, like he saw it happening, but he pulled off anyway. And the guy was like screaming. His eyes are like puffy and red, and it's like he's screaming that his eyes are hurting, and he had to ride home that whole long way. I think it was like a 30 to 45 minute drive with his eyes burning. It was like, things like that, where we knew that, people didn't really care for us. There were riots, there were things about to happen where they would like have all of us in school kind of sheltered from whatever was going on the outside. So it was like just a lot of things that could cause people or kids to grow up into adults and have really traumatic memories of those things, and what they call it, post-traumatic syndrome. Like, I understand how people have that, growing up as kids and seeing stuff like that. So that is just a little historical background into the tumultuous kind of childhood times that we had, just because of the circumstances that we were born into, really had no control over. So I've learned a lot of things like that from that situation that kind of helps me overcome any mistreatments. Like, I always try to like look at the facts of the situation, what people are doing. And I think that the people in the community at the time, when they made these decisions for us, I think there were some people that had the best intentions at heart. So I always give that the benefit of the doubt. And your intentions, whether good or bad, sometimes they just end up with people not really agreeing to whatever it is that the decision that you've made. And you just have to learn how to kind of just put on tough skin and deal with it. And don't be bitter about it. Don't hold grudges. Like, just do what you have to do and move on. So a lot of my channel and a lot of my podcasts and things will be dedicated to how to really effectively do that. how do you just go on from situations like that happen? The other part of my childhood that has helped me to grow into the character that I have is I was molested as a child. So probably when I was 8 years old, till about the age of 12. I was constantly molested by a family member, and I didn't say anything. And it's really unfortunate. I know I could have told my mom. I know I could have told my dad. I was just afraid. I don't know why I didn't say anything. Kind of makes me upset today that I just didn't take care of myself enough to, raise my hand and say, hey, I need some help, because every time we go around this family member, I'm being attacked. And so I learned a lot from that. It did kind of mess with me internally from a sexual standpoint. It made me unsure of who I am. It kind of made me feel really bad about who I am. And it really took a long time for me to forgive myself for being in this situation, which I didn't have a control for over again. But it really helped me forgive myself for not opening up my mouth and saying what I needed to say to get out of that situation. And it kind of helped me recognize some things that I need to do differently to stand up for myself, which is another part of what I will be discussing on my podcast and some of the different topics and things. So, that happened for an extended period of time. Shortly after that, my mom got remarried to a man who was kind of abusive. Married a man who was verbally abusive. He wasn't quite as physically abusive, but he threatened her like he was going to hit her often, and us as kids. And so it had gotten to the point one time where she had tried to put him out of the house and tried to get away from him, and he kept harassing us, and we actually ended up having to live in a battered women's shelter. But because me and my brothers were like in teenage years, I was probably 13 years old. My brothers are like a year and 2 years behind me. Because of their age, they weren't able to stay with us. So we had to be separated from our family for a few months, trying to just get away from this madman who was harassing our family. And I ended up having to go to court and testify in court. So just a lot of craziness there. I'm just sharing like as much of a quick story about all of these things so you could really understand and appreciate what I have to say, what I've learned in life, how I have applied these lessons to my life to improve my life, and not held any grudge against anybody. How I've really been able to forgive people and still smile, and then I still accept, like, things still happen to me today that because of my past, I'm able to overcome quicker, and I'm able to use like these tools. Like I have like tool belts and ideas that I really want to share with you all on what I do to kind of get over these things. But as you're listening to my story, I'm hoping you're realizing how resilient I am from all of these things that happened to us throughout our childhood. I mean, it wasn't the best type of situation, but it wasn't the worst. We had things constantly happening. And like I was thinking about this the other day, right when in high school, it just got really bad in the bottom where I was living. We were just having like a lot of crime and a lot of different things happening in our environment. I mean, I remember one time my mom, we were visiting an aunt in Charlotte, and she lived in kind of a similar type of neighborhood, and we were just there visiting her and just going to the car because we were getting ready to go home, and right at the car was a dead body. Somebody had just gotten shot, and we're kids and we're having to see this stuff like all, like, it's just amazing, all the kind of stuff that we had to see and witness growing up. And so I remember, like, in high school, we would have to, like, duck down and hide when people would start shooting outside. Like, it was kind of almost like being in the military. I mean, what I would imagine, like, being on the field, like, you're hearing shots and you're trying to take cover, so nobody shoots you. Like, that's actually, it's like, from a child's perspective, that's just not cool. And then I do remember my mom working so hard to try to get us out of that situation. The welfare system was set up at the time. I'm not quite sure how it works right now, but at the time, the welfare system was set up where my mom couldn't work. If she got a job that paid her enough to, like, make ends meet, they would take away her food stamps. They would take away some of the welfare checks that she got. Like, it was just really a tough situation for her to try to get us out of that situation. And she really did try. She would take me with her to the welfare office, and they would keep us in there for hours. I don't even know why they were keeping us in there. And they would just give her the worst time. Like, they would just have her refilling out forms and, like, just making things so tough. And then I remember the times where she would be, like, almost in tears, trying to just, get stuff done. Like, all these requirements that were kind of ridiculous for, like, it was like we just constantly had to be in the welfare office for whatever reason. But I remember one pivotal time in that experience for me was when my mom took me with her, and the young lady that was helping her was just awful. She was just really, really mean, trying to make my mom look like she was dumb or something, like, ma'am, what you have to do is fill out this, just like that type of attitude, just the worst. And I remember my mom looking at her and she's like, you know what? I cannot wait till my child grows up and she never has to deal with this. My daughter's never gonna have to deal with anything like this, with you treating her like this and having to depend on welfare. And she looked right at me and she said, you hear that, Renika? You're not going to have to worry about any of this ever. This is not going to be your life. I want you to see this, because this is not the life that you are going to live. This is not it. This is not it for you. And that was one of the best things that my mom could have ever done for me. It really did motivate me to do something different, get out of that situation, and make something better. I never ever wanted to be in that situation ever again. It was just like the worst. But that was just like a very extended version of my life growing up, and some of the trials and tribulations that I went through to get here. One of the other things that really sits with me is when I was in high school, I actually used to be in the AP courses and the honor courses. So I took a lot of honor classes, and I remember probably around my junior year, we started having these conversations in some of these classes, and they were related to the course that we were taking. And I remember people often saying, people who live in the projects, or people who are from that environment are a product of their environment. They're going to grow up and they're going to do the same thing. They're going to repeat all of this, and they're never going to be out of this. Everybody in here should be glad they're not in that situation. And I would be sitting there like, hello, I'm in that situation right now. But I never really shared that with my peers. Like, they would invite me to their houses, but I never invited them to my house. Maybe like one time I might have, but never ever would I invite a classmate to where I was from, because first of all, I didn't live in a house. Second of all, I lived in the projects. I wasn't quite sure what could happen on a day-to-day basis, so I didn't want them to be down there and get scared and never want to be my friend anymore. So when they would make these comments like this in class, it's kind of interesting for me because it's like, oh, I'm kind of glad they don't see me like from that area. But then again, it's kind of sad because they see me and they know who I am. And if they really understood me, then they would know that everybody has a chance. Nobody has to be the product of that environment. They can make changes. People can be something different. They can grow up and be better, even if they grew up in the worst circumstances. And so that's the premise of what this channel is all about. How do you change your circumstances? How do you look at your life? How do you figure out like what steps you should take? How do you use your resiliency to bounce back? How do you recognize things within yourself to make you better? I can tell you that one thing that is still a struggle for me today that I'm currently working on and continue to work on is my relationships with people in general. So I have a tendency to allow people into my life who I know might be ill intent. They might have ill intent, or they may not be there for the right reasons. Some people used to think I was gullible, but it's not that. It's just that I'm nice and I'm trying to give people the opportunity to prove me wrong. But I've been scarred from that so long. And the reason why I do it is because I've always been judged. I've been judged since I was a child and not really given the opportunity to get to know me for who I am and give me opportunities based on, you know, getting to know me. People would put us in circumstances often whenever I was growing up. So it's always been important to me not to do that to people. Don't put people in boxes. Don't judge people. Don't, like actually get to know somebody before you put them in a box and put them in a category and, sign them off. Like that's what it is. And now I've been burnt so much with people kind of taking advantage of that for me that I have a different approach. I'm still able to be nice to people. I still am kind, but I'm very, very protective of myself and who I allow into my life because of those experiences. And that's the journey that I want to take you along with. I'll be sharing like story times and different things that have happened and my perspective on how to deal with those things. And then I'll engage you in these discussions as well by asking you for your feedback. I'm very open to hearing what you might have to say and what things you might contribute for anybody else that I can bring back up at a later point to share with the audience. So that was it in a nutshell. I know that was a lot, and I thank you for hanging in there with me. But I really did think it was extremely important for you to get to know who I am, what I'm about, why what I say matters, and really get to relate with me moving forward. So I am so excited to have you come along on this journey with me, and I appreciate you listening so much. Don't forget to subscribe and share and like and really help me get this word out to people who actually need to hear from someone like myself. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a great day.